Chapter 3. The Need to be Understood. Whether we name divine presence synchronicity, serendipity, or graced moment matters little. What matters is the reality that our hearts have been understood. Nothing is as real as a healthy dose of magic which restores our spirits. Nancy Long. The glossy palomino accompanied me across the leafy grounds, horse and teenager matching paces. As they neared the hospital, a nurse rolled Janet's wheelchair out the door and onto the wide driveway. It wasn't the first time I had noticed this patient. Appearing to be in her late 20s, she might have been pretty if her features had displayed any animation, but with her head tilted down and her eyes unfocused, her face was a mask of stillness. Her body was motionless and rigid. Janet hadn't made a sound since she arrived at Fairfax Hospital the previous week. She didn't flinch when a nurse inserted a needle into her arm to give her fluids. When a doctor entered her room and asked her questions, she remained impassive. Holding her right wrist, he raised her arm above her head. When he let it go, it stayed in this awkward position, as if she were a department store mannequin. After a few moments, the doctor gently lowered her arm. Janet had a classic case of catatonia, the unresponsive state first described in 1874 by German psychiatrist Karl Ludwig Kahlbaum. On this day, in the early 1970s, scientists had not yet developed the drugs that would become standard treatment for mental disorders. As such, Fairfax Hospital treated catatonia, depression, schizophrenia, dementia, and other maladies of the mind by examining their patients' life stories. They explored who these people were before illnesses gripped their psyches. They discovered what had motivated them and what had mattered to them. Then, using the collected information, they designed treatments unique to each person. When Janet first arrived at Fairfax, social workers questioned her family closely and learned she loved horses. As a child, Janet had lived down the road from a farm. Every day after school, she went to curry a stallion and 2 mares and muck out their stalls. In exchange, she was allowed to ride them. When she matured into adulthood and moved away, her labor of love ended. I was not surprised when the nurse told me to go to the pasture and bring a horse for Janet. Fairfax Hospital's approach to psychiatric treatment was a way of life for me. My uncle and aunt owned the 20-acre facility, and my family lived in a 2-room house on the hospital grounds. At 19, I had already been working at Fairfax for 4 years. I was a gopher, mopping floors, helping patients with showers, washing dishes, raking leaves, and relieving the nursing staff during breaks. I was expected to do whatever needed to be done at any given moment. The hospital kept the palomino named Heidi and 2 other horses among a menagerie that included dogs, peacocks, pheasants, and chickens. The grounds included fragrant gardens, meandering paths, rolling lawns, shaded by a canopy of maple and oak trees, and a stream so clear that salmon spawned there every year. The verdant setting itself was a treatment tool at Fairfax Hospital. Fresh air, nature's rhythms, and the company of animals often reconnected patients to the world. Each time I approached the pasture, Heidi would come to the fence and nuzzle me. The palomino was a people horse, stepping forward for caresses and carrots, while her pasture mates retreated. Now, with me at her side, Heidi clopped onto the pavement and halted in front of Janet. The sun was bright, but Janet didn't blink, even as the big horse drew close. There was a long hush, which even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Janet suddenly stretched out her arm, the same one that the doctor had raised and lowered. She touched Heidi with a finger. Then she laid her whole hand on the palomino's warm side and began to stroke her. After a few moments, she pulled herself up and out of the wheelchair. She grasped Heidi's face and leaned in close to speak to her. Her tone was urgent and soft. I and others couldn't make out what she was saying. We didn't try. This was a private communication of souls between a long, mute woman and an empathetic horse. 3 weeks later, Janet walked out of Fairfax Hospital and went home. her spirit and life restored. I never saw her again, but the conversation I couldn't hear on the driveway that day would somehow echo decades later. A dog does a quick barking dance for a biscuit dangling just out of reach. Rubber soles squeak as a grinning toddler makes a dash across shiny tiles. Chairs scrape up to a table, and hammers begin pounding nails into wood. A male voice calls out, "We need you at the men's club," and another answers, "I'm coming, I'm coming." Out of sight, drums thump in varying tones and rhythms. The front door swings open with a whoosh. 3 teenagers spill in, all talking at once. Silverado's a noisy place. People aren't here to rest or slip quietly from society. They come here to live. They are people with Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Parkinson's, and a host of other memory-impairing illnesses. As these conditions progress, speech and reason deteriorate. The easy familiarity of the loving spouse of 50 years, the dependable parent, or the sibling with tandem experiences seems to be over. Until you step into Silverado, at Silverado's core, there is knowledge that can transform the lives of the memory impaired while enriching the souls of everyone around them. This knowledge puts aside fear and replaces it with love. The staff at Silverado knows that the human spirit glows until we take our last breath. While memory impairment erodes the spirit's ability to express itself through what is considered normal words and actions, it doesn't mean the spirit is not present. It still shines, but speaks differently. By devoting time, effort, and love to accepting the memory impaired as they are, and by discovering new ways to communicate, we can build new relationships with them. It's like learning a new language. This is the vision of Silverado. We all have a need to love and be loved, a need to be understood and appreciated, to surge through the day with purpose, a need to enjoy simple pleasures, to bask in the warmth of sunshine, and to connect with animals, children, and flowers. These needs never change, regardless of the effects of memory disorders. For those of us with unimpaired memory, life is linear. We mature from children to teenagers to adults. Last year, this year, yesterday, today, tomorrow. But for people with memory impairment, today could be 20 years ago. An adult child can be mistaken for a long-deceased mother. When those we love start stepping off the straight chronological line, we try desperately to refocus them. No, today is Tuesday. I'm not your mother. I'm your daughter. Don't you remember we already ate lunch? When we realize we can't fix their memories, many of us withdraw. What's the point of trying to connect when they won't remember? Why not just keep these frail, confused people safe, comfortable, clean, and fed? Because there's a better way. Silverado is a memory care organization whose vision isn't really about memory. The memory impaired don't need linear thoughts and words to connect when joy, touch, hugs, smiles, and laughter are the language. It's about reaching and nurturing the human spirit. The day of the week doesn't matter. What matters is that the day has meaning. How does Silverado do this? Animals are central at Silverado. At least one dog and one cat for every 25 residents, one bird or more for every 4 people who reside at a Silverado community, a burbling tank with colorful fish for every 40. Who would expect the minimum number of resident animals would be a fundamental rule in memory care? But Silverado's 40-page copyrighted pet care manual spells out the regulations clearly. That barking dog leaping for a treat is one of more than 600 non-humans, including rabbits, guinea pigs, and even miniature horses, living permanently in Silverado communities. They're joined by pets that move in with residents and by others who accompany staff to work each day. Children are imperative too. The child barreling through the living room and the teens arriving in a chatty swarm. Silverado even encourages employees to bring their children to work with them. So you see infants slumbering in residents' laps and toddlers taking their first steps in Silverado hallways. School buses chug up in front of Silverado communities and drop off youngsters who burst through the doors to spend the afternoon participating in activities alongside residents, helping care for the pets or sitting quietly to study. Purpose feeds the spirit as well. A man who has always loved woodworking may have lost the ability to express his interest in ways we recognize, but he hasn't lost his passion for meaningful activities. At Silverado, he won't craft his woodwork projects alone. Other residents and staff will work next to him because a passion shared with friends is more satisfying. This understanding underlies our club concept. In the drum circle, for instance, residents come together to thump out rhythmic expressions that humans have enjoyed for ages. The relief, the pleasure, the dignity of normal that is part of life at Silverado, where activities reflect the interest of adults. Silverado residents garden, cook, create music, and paint. They consider current events. They do not toss balloons, swaddle dolls, or stare at cartoons, unless they have always enjoyed cartoons. The changes wrought by memory disorder may seem to turn grown-ups into children, but the practice of giving them childish games and toys dulls the spirit. It's also the first step towards isolating them in a less than normal social space. As a society, we often treat people with memory disorders as though they have something the rest of us might catch. When they become less able to participate in normal life and their behavior strays from the linear path, we quarantine them behind drawn shades, closed doors, at home or institutions, where few but staff and dutiful family ever appear. Their memory impairment frightens us, confuses us, angers us. Sometimes what they do and say repulses us. The common courtesy of being looked in the eye when addressed can quickly erode. But when we stop nurturing their spirit through meaningful connection with the world, we hasten their decline. Depression, loneliness, and feelings of worthlessness aggravate their symptoms and their overall health. Hoping to galvanize America's attention, experts in public policy and health call the rise in memory-impairing diseases an epidemic. Doctors diagnose a new case of Alzheimer's every 66 seconds. According to the Alzheimer's Association, 5.4 million Americans have the disease, and nearly 15 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's and other dementias. Within 40 years, as many as 16 million more Americans could develop memory impairment. The worldwide figure may exceed 131 million. America's propensity to solve all ailments with pills contribute to the sad lives that so many of the memory impaired endure. Loading more prescriptions into their bodies to get their behavior under control is the easiest solution in today's world. So they swallow as many as 15 different drugs a day. Those who don't sink into a near constant sleep often lash out verbally and physically. What's mistaken for incurable aggression in the memory impaired is the spirit's cry of protest against the regimen that suffocates their self-expression. Current research is primarily seeking a pharmacological cure for memory impairment, as well as a way to prevent it in the first place. This quest dominates media coverage of Alzheimer's and shapes the public discussion. While strongly supporting this research, Silverado also passionately leads the way to improve the daily lives of those with memory impairment in the here and now. What if, as a society, we overcame our fear of Alzheimer's disease and responded to it with love? What if this disease represented an opportunity? What if we accepted and embraced those with memory impairment? We would discover what Silverado experiences every day. Our own spirit flourishes through selfless love and services to the memory impaired. Tom arrived in a wheelchair, head and body leaning to one side, his skin like yellowish tissue paper loosely draped over bones. As Sheila, a Silverado caregiver, rolled him through wide, bright hallways, she spoke gently in welcome, explaining where he was going and what he could expect. But only his wife, Dorothy, walking beside him, responded. Tom had not spoken in a long time, nor had he eaten or taken any notice of the world through his eyes that seemed permanently shut. Tom had been in a hospital for weeks. Physicians couldn't pinpoint the cause of his nearly vegetative state. He was in his 80s, and other medical issues complicated his Alzheimer's disease. The doctors had told Dorothy that Tom had just a week or two to live. So on this morning, an ambulance delivered Tom to Silverado to spend his last days. A large window brought sunshine and the vista of a blooming backyard into the room chosen for him. Sheila didn't know whether Tom would ever open his eyes again, but ever the optimist, she positioned his bed so he had a view of the outdoors. Once she got Tom settled, Dorothy turned towards the dresser to unpack his suitcase. The two women talked quietly, Dorothy occasionally falling silent as she folded the clothing that was as much a part of her life as her husband's. The red flannel shirt, Tom's uniform on weekend mornings, and the beige cardigan he wore while reading on the patio. Suddenly the sheets rustled, and the bed shifted with a small thud. Was that a horse I just saw? Sheila and Dorothy turned. Tom was sitting up, stretching forward toward the window, eyes wide open in a blue gleam. Sheila went to the window to open it and leaned out. Two miniature horses, one silvery and the other black with gray flecks, were sauntering along further down the yard. Sheila looked back at Tom. Dorothy was clasping his hand to her cheek as she stooped down to his face. "I never thought I would ever hear your voice again," she whispered to him, looking up at Sheila, tears in her eyes. She added, "My husband has a soft spot for horses." Tom spent much of the next afternoon in Silverado's garden. There he relished Dorothy's company and velvety nuzzles by Hocus Pocus and Little Rascal, the two little horses which had passed by Tom's window. The man whom doctors predicted would soon pass noiselessly from the world confounded their expectations. Tom's memory remained impaired and his body fragile, but his spirit glowed again. Sheila had been a caregiver at Silverado from the beginning. The sight of Tom and his wife sitting together in the sunlight, chatting and laughing, still stands out as one of her best memories. She reminisces. Tom's family had tried everything before he came here. His wife Dorothy felt she had already lost him. She hadn't realized that his eyes were open, just enough that his spirit could still watch the world. Who would have thought a pair of horses could accomplish what the doctors hadn't been able to do?